Kareem, thank you so much for coming on Realistic Happiness Podcast.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
And you're so colourful. I love it. You're bringing colour into this
Thank
episode.
you. When it's winter, especially, I try to bring in as much brightness as I can.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm dressed quite monochrome.
No, but
Quite
it
boring.
suits you. With you, it really brings out your eyes.
Aww.
And with the eyes and the hair, I feel like if there's too much color, it feels a bit of a disbalance. Well, I've got such a
Yeah.
bright red situation going on.
And you make
that
it work. Red and pink.
I kind of forget that it's there, to be honest. Like, I've had this color for 3.5 years.
Yeah?
And it's sort of become my signature color. So whenever it starts to grow out, I just re-dye it. But I think I've just been on this journey of embracing colors, I guess.
I love it. So the first thing I want to ask you is why do you think the world still struggles to create spaces where everyone belongs?
That's a deep cut.
I'm sorry.
No, nothing to be sorry about. I mean, I love it personally. I think let's look at human biology, right? Our brains are designed to work as efficiently as possible. And that means we tend to make snap judgments, snap assumptions. Because your brain recognizes pattern and is like, I've seen this before. This is good for me, this isn't. And then if you combine that with evolutionary theory that says that we've got this instinct to protect ourselves and protect our own, you see that there's this issue with this sense of difference. On whether it's conscious or subconscious, we tend to be, at least in the beginning, afraid of what's different from us. Combine that with how society has socialized us in a specific way within a specific crowd. There's a typical idea in your brain of who is like me and who isn't. And then you scale that up and you think who has been in power for the longest period we can think of, who has the system benefited, and you start getting this larger idea of, okay, this is who's normal, this is who's right, this is who's correct, this is who's like our default when we think of person, right? And these are the people that aren't. So I think that's the root of it, and that's why I admire anyone putting in the effort, because you are fighting against instincts that have protected us for years and years. But it's hard to let go of and that's something I often try to talk about. How do you let go of this thing that's feels safe for you? And that's part of why, not to, we can deep dive into allyship a bit later, but that's why I find allyship so important. That it's, and even further, things like coalition, or even a friend of mine likes to say co-conspiration. That's sort of a, coalition 2.0 is co-conspiration.
I love that.
And the sort of coming together to change the system, but it's about all of us. It's about people who are in power, it's about people who aren't, and how you can work together to create a safer space for everybody. Because I do think even those that struggle and maybe even get to the point where they block spaces like these or advocate against them are in of themselves struggling, feeling unheard, feeling disconnected from, feeling afraid. And that's, to me, part of what we need to work on. This isn't a divisive issue, this is a humanity issue. And I don't know a single person who isn't struggling with something. And if we open the sort of conversation on both sides, I think something beautiful can come out of it where we can all benefit.
I agree. And so everyone needs to collaborate, but no one wants to take responsibility, it looks like, right? Even if they have the power to make change.
Yeah. I think it's there's a price to responsibility, right? If you take ownership of something, let's look at corporate as a classic example. If you, as a big director, bring in a new project, you've often cultivated a sense of social trust, right? A sense of responsibility. People trust you to bring in this, people trust you to take this forward. And then for whatever reason or another, it fails. You hired the wrong person, you took the wrong strategy, just the system right now isn't ready for whatever it is you're trying to create. You end up looking bad, you end up losing face, you end up losing influence. That means you're afraid. How am I going to look? Where is my career going to go? Who's above me? What do they think? Is the board going to agree with this? Am I safe? So every time you move forward, you take a risk. And that's part of the responsibility allergy, right? Because people might love to agree with you, but they're scared to put their neck out. And that's because they themselves feel unsafe. And I think this really is a good point to illustrate how engagement, connection, really the stuff that's at the heart of my business, this whole sense of bringing people together and getting them connected to their work, excited about their work, feeling welcome in their work so that they produce stronger and better, is working on the systems and the cultures that we have cultivated. Because if those that are at the top of the systems, the directors, the VPs, the C level, don't feel safe when they are diverse, that says more about the system than them.
It does.
I mean, we already see it. Think of the amount of female representation we have on boards, and that's just women. And that's honestly, historically, white women have had the strongest movement, have been able to access more doors, and that still is the challenge. We still talk about the women issue, especially when you look at entrepreneurship and the funding gap. So if you think if the most quote unquote welcome minority group is still having these kinds of struggles, what does that say for the rest of us?
But do you think it could be because I've seen a stat somewhere that women entrepreneurs and CEOs are like the highest it's ever been, right?
Yeah.
But could it be just because it's like a easy thing to talk about because it's repeated instead of touching on a new topic like neurodiversity, etc., in the workplace, instead of tapping into like LGBTQ or something like this?
People find it easiest to relate to the women's issue because we all know a woman. We all love a woman. We all have a mother, a sister, a partner for some of us. So it's the most that you can place it in your life. You've probably seen your mother frustrated about that, your sister frustrated about that, whatever. So it's relatable to you, you know, right? That's the struggle I can get behind, right? Because that also helps me. I'm a man and I'm saving. When you start talking about issues that other people struggle with, it gets further and further from your circle. A lot of my friends say I'm the first disabled person they've gotten meaningful interactions with. And you know, it's very rare that I meet someone with a disabled child, with disabled family, you know, and even if they're in your family, they're distant, right? They're cousins or something, and you barely see them. Because that also has a lot to do with how we've treated and institutionalized disabled people. You know, a lot of us that need care are placed in long-term institutions for that, and that keeps us separate from society. So the further it is from what you consider part of your life, the easier it is to sort of look away and be like, not my problem. Someone else's problem.
I have too many problems.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the thing. And there's always that excuse of, there's so many hours in a day. There's only so much I can do. So let me focus on that one issue. And I think a lot of people have probably talked about this idea of like silos.
Yeah.
The DEI silos. If you start, well, no, here, maybe I'll put it this way. I think the silos are exactly what's holding our movement back. Because we are out here arguing about the women's issue versus the queer issue versus the neurodivergent issue versus the disabled issue versus the colored issue. and treating them as separate lines, separate movements towards, at least, at the very least, equality, at the a bit better equity, and hopefully just access. But I do think we are united under our experience of marginalization. We are all marginalized. And as we bring more awareness to this idea of intersectionality, how our different identities interplay together to create our experience, you realize that, as taking the example of you, Daisy, for example, you're neurodivergent and a woman. Both are true at the same time. It's not like you can isolate your womanness from your neurodivergentness.
Right.
You also look a certain way. We just mentioned, we were talking about examples of how racial profiling could happen to you in certain spaces. So your at least perceived nationality or heritage, your ethnicity, is also something you can't separate.
Right.
So why is it that all of these things exist within you and you rationally as a person know you can separate them? But suddenly when you talk about your issues, we feel the need to segment. I think if we start looking at it as we who are different are marginalized and pushed away from opportunities within society. And it's about uplifting all of us together, whether we're men, whether we're women, whether we're queer, whether we're neurodivergent, just under the fact that we are different from what has been considered the norm. And, if we consolidate resources, if we consolidate programs, if we consolidate community together, we'll get much further. Because imagine if all those leaders that say, oh, race is my thing, or like women are my thing. Imagine if all of that was devoted towards one single point of entry. I am here to support you because I know the system hasn't. And I don't care which type of difference you have. Don't you think we'll get further?
Yes, a lot more further. And intersectionality, just for those that may not know the term, is the combining multiple things together, right?
Yeah. I think it's just to tell you a bit more about the concept, it's quoted by Kimberly Crenshaw, if I'm not wrong. She's a prominent activist, and I believe by the time this became popularized, I think she's a lawyer, an activist, and a professor. Don't quote me on that. Not my area of expertise. It's not like I have it on top of my head all the time. But it's this idea of having these roads, right? Of like, part of your identity is like one of the roads in your life. The class you grew up in is another road. The perceived gender you have is another road. If all of these roads come together and intersect, that's what intersectionality is. It's this idea that all of it interplays together to shape your experience.
Okay.
I don't know, a little bit of a lecture moment.
No, we love a lecture moment. So that's really interesting what you've touched on, because we are humans. We're so complex. Like you said, so many different things about us, like you mentioned about me. So the fact that not even companies or leaders, but just society as well focuses on one thing. And there's like LGBTQ communities and communities for this race or age, etc. Like they just like to put people into stereotypes, into groups to just make it easier and find your tribe. And it's just, yeah, it's kind of exhausting. As an individual, it's exhausting to be like, oh, I'm this, but I'm also this, I'm also this. It just makes you feel like, yeah, like I remember when I first saw the setbacks of being a woman in the workplace, I saw how my colleagues in sales were like thriving. And then with me, I always had doors closed. And then also then finding out I had ADHD, I was like, oh, that makes sense. Why I was so loud at school, etc. And then I was like, shit, another thing. Great, another hurdle, another setback. So like, it is like, yeah, it's exhausting thinking, oh, there's this and this and this and this and this. I have everything like setting me back in order to succeed, in order to live a normal life, let's say.
It pains me to hear you felt that way. Maybe it's because it reminds me a bit of myself. Reminds me a bit of all the stories I hear. And I think the first lesson I want to sort of impart, if I can, this isn't about you. And that is the biggest. My experience in this field has taught me one thing: it is not about you. You know, we're built in the system of meritocracy. So we're taught to believe that, you know, you're going to do well in school, you're going to get a job, you're going to learn how to navigate that job, and you're just going to make it through. So then when it doesn't work because of these systemic barriers of how society views you as abnormal, different from the norm of, quite frankly, usually white, young men, you're just pushed aside and then you start questioning yourself. What did I do wrong? I think I see it a lot with my younger female friends who grew up in the era of like girl power, come through, icon, girl boss, you know. That sense of boss bitch mentality, which now we think, you know, I don't know if you know about the whole scandal with Katy Perry and Woman's World, the song she made.
I saw some things about it. Yeah.
Like, you know, that was very much like this whole it's a woman's world and we're lucky to be living in it, or whatever. It's just very much this sense of girl power feminism and how everyone's like, girl, we're way beyond that now. Like, I think that experience is a reminder. You know, we grew up with these influences of, okay, you're gonna be this boss girl because we fought for that. You know, think of early representations of the 2000s in media. And then you come into the world where now people are a lot more aware of things like mental health, neurodivergence, etc., etc.
Yeah.
You start realizing that all that overachieving has you exhausted. You're left with anxiety. You're left with undiagnosed ADHD. You're left with whatever. And then you realize that I can't keep being on this fuel girl power forever. Or like for those, and this doesn't just apply to women, by the way. I think because we're talking about your experience, that's how I'm framing it. But you know, this applies to women, this applies to men, this applies to everyone. You can't keep riding this wave of, okay, I'm gonna achieve forever, I'm gonna go by my merit forever, and you start realizing that there are spaces that are just unopened and unwelcome to you.
Yeah.
And we tend to think they're unwelcome because of a perpetrator. That's not it either. It's not about, people are just players in a system trying to survive. The system is the problem, not the people. Some of those, you know, I think it's easier to blame, look at that director who's being racist. Look at that leader who's being sexist. Look at that leader who's being homophobic. Look at that leader who's being ableist. They're just people trying to survive in a system that has taught them these things are wrong. They were socialized that way. And, you know, we all, for example, like, I don't know, for me, my mom taught me that I should never leave home without a coat or I might catch a cold. Tell me that long enough, I'll internalize it. So can you imagine if you grew up being what society considers normal, were told your entire life you are what's normal, what's anything else is abnormal, and you're part of the in group, and suddenly you meet people from the out group. Of course you're gonna be scared. If you've been surrounded by people that are like your whole life, like imagine, you know, if you're in a village filled with same people, same upbringing, same whatever, which is when you look at the higher levels of quote unquote society, that's what boarding schools, that's what higher education, elite institutions are. They're bubbles. And then suddenly you step out of that bubble and you're like, Oh, you're different. No, 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 you're scary. No, 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 no. I don't know you. I only know people that look like me. You're not seen as human anymore. And again, to reinforce, it's not about you.
Mm-hmm. Great.
I don't know if that helps.
No, it does. I think
Hopefully, our audience at least.
I think we need to go deeper though, don't we?
Oh, no.
Because sorry.
If this isn't deep enough.
No, I agree. I mean, what was interesting, because I lived in Italy first and then I moved to the UK, and there was a huge contrast with the schooling system.
Mm.
In Italy, it's mixed.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we had people from all sorts of walks of life, people who were doing another year again in class because they were dyslexic, etc. My best friend had Down syndrome at school, Alessandro, really good friend. So I never saw him as different, or someone in a wheelchair as different, or someone who was dyslexic different, because we were sharing the same, we were in the same public school. And then when I moved to the UK, I learned about girls' schools, boys' schools, private schools, and then I was in the public school. And that's when I noticed, like, I'm a bit, not even, like you said, don't make it about yourself, but like, yeah, I just remember I was like, I'm a bit strange compared to the normal students and the wealthy students. I was like, I'm not like them. And I just remember feeling a bit more at home back in my old school. And I think that shaped me. That was really important in childhood, to like understand like everyone's.
But it's interesting hear how you just phrased it. Even though you grew up socialized very differently, you still have this idea of normal at the back of your head somewhere.
Yes.
And that's what makes this a sneaky devil.
Mm-hmm.
This idea of normalcy. I mean, of course, I studied media theory, so this is a lot in my background. Um, there's this idea of like culture and counterculture. We live in a discourse of culture, but there in that discourse there is a dominant voice. There is a hegemonic voice, a voice of what we consider typical.
Mm.
And that's something we are exposed to from a very early age. This idea of, I guess I'd call it neutralization. You know, we all have, from even the youngest of ages, we all have seen these characters and these stories that have shaped what the world is.
Mm.
And yes, we've made so many strides in media diversity. And, you know, there are different stories now. But still, does that come back to decades and decades where stories were all the same?
Mm.
No. So even though when you were in that, but that also like shows the power of community, right? When you were in that space that allowed you to think differently, you're able to. But then you were re-socialized into a different space that is closer to power, that is closer to normalcy, if we can call it that, or centers of power.
Mm.
And funny how quickly that shifted, right? You went from being able to see everybody to be part of a diverse space and engage in it and see people as human to this, okay, I suddenly feel weird because I'm just surrounded by these people who've bought into this idea of normal.
I was just thinking back to when, yeah, the idea of normal even came from, because, yeah, like you said, I was in the community, I was in school. Is it TV? Is it Disney films? Is it like where? How can it stem so young?
It's all of it. The whole system works together to perpetrate an idea. That is what hegemony is. It's invisible because it's in everything you touch. From your parents that were socialized that way themselves, to the television you watch, to the books you read, unless someone like takes you, moves you to a commune, features only diverse TV shows, feminist authors and activists, like, and we see that, right? We see when people are like really like, think of families that like decided to unschool their children, give them a global education, you know. Unless you made that conscious choice from the minute you were born, And even then, the minute you re-enter society, it's clicks back in. Because it's just been so deeply ingrained in us for so long. Because that's what benefited the people in power, right? No one wanted to lose their power, so they made sure to perpetuate social systems that kept them in power.
Wow. So fear again.
Fear is a very baseline human emotion. The beauty of that is so is love. So is community. And that's what gives me hope.
And they're so powerful. I think more powerful than fear.
I hope so. No, even more than I hope so. I'm living proof that is. Because it is hope, it is belief, it is desire to change that has allowed me to build my business, that has allowed me to build my career. It is that, whether I like it or not, for someone like me, you need allies. You need cheerleaders. You need door openers. And without them, I wouldn't have made it. But they are living proof that the system can change because someone chose differently. A lot of people are like, oh, choose differently. What is that message you leave people with? Yeah. One choice you make can make a world of a difference. Even if it's just for one person.
Exactly. Whether it's if you hire someone, that you have a choice there. Whether it's befriending people, you have a choice. Like you said, opening doors, like keeping in contact, opportunities, choices every day, helping someone down the street that needs your help. And it's so simple. It's so, so simple. And it not only helps you to get a better understanding and widen your world, right? It helps the other person 10 times more. It restores faith in humanity, it builds community.
I think you're right on the money in that sense. But I think I can talk about this because I have been developing something around this disability and ableism for a few sessions I did recently. And I came across just horrifying statistics, especially when it comes to disabled people and mental health. And I don't, I just talked about this idea of like marginalization, united under difference, and I fully 100% believe in that. But I also know that I believe it was 20% more likely to develop anxiety and depression throughout my lifetime.
20% is a lot.
Yeah. But if you look at it, we're under socialized, we're placed in institutions, we're pushed aside. A lot of us are sent to special education. Many people don't want to date a disabled person because of all kinds of inconveniences that comes from. Many people also, you have friendships with disabled people, but it might be too hard to plan a trip with them because of the accommodations you need to think of, or invite them to your birthday because your house has stairs, or. And this is one of the reasons I'm thankful for my disability, because it makes my barriers apparent. I can use it. I can use that to show you. Then when you're blind to it, that's on you. Because you can't say, with gender, you can say you don't see it. With sexuality, you can say you don't see it. Even with race, you can say you don't see it. I mean, that's a bit harder to believe, but. But when a guy in a wheelchair can't get up the stairs, that's kind of hard not to see. But you need to look at it. You need to push through it.
Yeah. And we need to work together. Honestly, I feel like it's like it just needs to be spoken about more. Neurodiversity, disabilities you can see, disabilities you can't see, right? inclusion.
But that's the funny part. I'm glad you brought up neurodiversity because I'm at the intersection of both disability and neurodiversity in the sense that, well, neurodivergence more accurately.
Yes, yeah.
Because yeah, neurodiversity is all of us. We all have diversity in our brains, but neurodivergence are those of us that have conditions that are considered a pathology of some sort.
And again, sectioning us.
Yeah. But I'm one of those people that my disability manifests as physical in the sense it manifests in how I walk and in my fine motor skills. But it is fundamentally a neurodevelopmental disorder. So it is both a disability and a neurodivergence. And that was something I did not know until like 2 years ago, I think.
Oh, wow.
When I was educating myself on DEI before I started this work. Well, I've been always doing this kind of work in communities and stuff, but before I started to formally focus on engagement through the lens of change, communications, and DEI, I had no idea until I walked into a session with an expert on neurodivergence and neurodiversity, and she pointed to a little chart and was like, "We've got a neurodivergent amongst us." Pointed to cerebral palsy, my condition, on a board. I was like, "What? What is the girl? What you talking about? You know?" Like I legit was like I was flabbergasted. Then I went home, talked to my mother. Turns out, when I was younger, doctors had mentioned to her that my brain might work a little differently. Um, for me, that manifests in a brain that thinks quite quickly, tend to bridge ideas. Like, you know, a lot of people think very linear. My mind works very exponential. So I have like tens, if not hundreds, of ideas going on at the same time. And it's about sort of grasping the straw of which line to focus on. Um, it also manifests in like energy management issues. Sometimes I have really high energy days. Sometimes I have really low energy days. It manifests in very high linguistic skills, so I'm able to communicate quite well. You'll notice I use a lot of big vocabulary words. Sometimes I'm like, people are like, "I love you," but I have no idea what you're talking
Oh,
about because you're looking like you're using like those for Americans related to the idea of like SAT words. Those words that we use on exams to sound fancy, those academic words. Um, so of course it has its, I guess, benefits and drawbacks in many ways, but it's part of the depth of my human experience, I guess.
that's a beautiful way to word it, that it's an experience. It's also something you teach, right? Like, if you don't, I mean, some lessons are quite hard, of course, but if you don't experience it yourself, how do you teach others how to maneuver those certain things?
Well, it's also it's interesting because when I talked to my mother, she mentioned never wanting to mention it to me
Oh,
because she felt I had enough to deal with by either needing like a mobility aid or a wheelchair, that she didn't want me to think about it and be overburdened with the idea that my mind works differently.
sort of trying to protect you, essentially.
Yeah. But that tells you enough. Like if you that goes back to this idea of we've been fed this idea of normal our entire life, this myth of normal. She was already like he's already not normal enough. I'm not gonna add to it.
Would it have helped you if you knew earlier?
I honestly don't know. With the right support, maybe,
Mm.
but I don't. I'm gonna get a bit deep here, so bear with me, y'all. I don't think I've ever had the right support. I'm always carrying the burden of adapting. So I don't know. I know. Has it made my life Is it nice to understand myself? Sure. But has it made my life any different? It will always be, unfortunately, and that's maybe something I can dive a bit more into. We live in a very medical model society. In disability studies, there's two models to see the world, sort of, two predominant models at least, the medical and the social model. The medical model is what we talked about, this idea of like segregation, segmentation, access based on official diagnoses. Uh, it's on you to advocate for yourself. You are different, and therefore you need to like push through. You adapt to us, right? You're sick. We need to heal you. We need to fix you. And often that's what, for example, I've gone through a lot of like rehabilitation, and the goal is to get you to these neurotypical and able-bodied standards of living, right? This, being independent, being able to feed yourself, being able to dress yourself. These are very like typical normal things. That's the goal, to get you as close to normal as possible so you can survive in this world. And I'm not saying that that doesn't have its merits, but living in a medical model driven environment, this idea of accommodations becomes very complicated. While if we look at the other side of it, the social model that talks about how society in many ways disables you, how instead of seeing you as the pathology, the illness, you are instead reflected upon as how society, due to whatever reason, in this sense, you being different as a disabled person, disables you.
Mm.
And that's where we look at the lens of lack of opportunities, lack of jobs, lack of accessible spaces, lack of community. Because, for example, I'm not sure if you've ever seen the documentary Crip Camp.
I haven't, no.
If not, I highly recommend it,
Okay.
even to our audience. And it exemplifies that really well. It talks about the disability movement in the US. And Judith Human, I believe. Yeah, she's a prominent disability rights activist and was a key player in getting the Americans with Disabilities Act passed after quite difficult periods of protest. Like I remember watching that and being like, they put disabled people through that. That sucks. But it all started from, I believe it was like a camp somewhere in New York State for like disabled people, where just people with different kinds of disabilities and allies banded together and supported each other, and they helped each other access activities, they helped each other shower, they helped each other take care of each other, and felt like they were a part of something. And that's sort of what I have to live with. Knowing it's possible, knowing that those communities can exist, that for whatever reason, as we've stepped into this age of efficiency and AI and tech and
Neuralink as
yeah,
well, the thing in your brain, like,
and hyper individualism, we've stepped further and further away from environments that allow something like that to be possible.
just lifting each other up, celebrating each other instead of just accommodating.
That is all I wish for in my lifetime.
So is that what ideal support would look like? Just everyone kind of together? Because we all can help each other. It's not like we're all helping one person live life. It gives back, you know. I'm a true believer in good karma, bad karma. What you put out in the world, you receive back. And who knows what happens if you were to get like all the support in the world. Like not only would you thrive, but like you bring others with you as well. You uplift others. You already
Exactly.
do.
That is exactly, that is the core of every single thing I do. I open doors. I push boundaries. Not for me. For people. For people like me. I don't want the next disabled entrepreneur to feel this way. I don't want the next, genius entrepreneur of color who just happens to be a woman and happens to be, I don't know, trans, for example, to feel this way. I don't want anyone else to feel this way. And that's why I take it upon myself. I say, hit me, reject me, push me away. I'm stubborn. I'm going to fight my way through it. Because hopefully, when I'm 80 and I can like comfortably retire if things go well.
Earlier than that. Not
Nah, but the
80.
thing is, I hope to get to a place where, well, maybe let's see. If I were to dream, I'd say like in a couple of decades from now, when I'm a bit more tired, I've been able to build something where I'm financially good and I work because I want to, not because I have to. And you know, maybe I'm doing my little sessions still when I'm a cute little grandpa with my, you know, an inclusion grandpa. But I want some people to come to me and be like, because of the work you did, because of the efforts you made, whether that's me, whether that's Sasha, whether that's Rodney, whether that's Excel, naming just a few change makers out there that have been making lots of difference, even in my own life. I want people to come to me and be like, because of the work y'all did, because of the boundaries y'all pushed, I'm able to walk into a company and be like, here I am. What's up? I'm able to live better. I'm able to thrive. And, you know, hopefully through the communities we've built, through the stories we tell, through the spaces, you never know what's going to happen. You know, I'd be very happy to be like, meet people and be like, oh, because of the work you did, we met and we created this thing. Or because of the work you did, we built a family together and now we're super happy. Like, it goes all the way from the systemic barriers to actual opportunity, to economic opportunity, but also to community. All I've ever wanted was to play a meaningful role in people's lives. And I'd like to think I've done that for the people that love me, because I love them too, and I try to give as much as I can, you know. My name means generous in Arabic. And I'd like to think I've embodied that, you know, with every project I've gotten, I've been able to support marginalized people in different ways. I have an entire team of marginalized people, and that is very much. It's not like I'm conscious. Like it's not like, oh, if you happen to be white or if you happen to be a guy, you're not welcome. We've got those too, but I try to intentionally invest in paths not taken, in people that aren't supported, because that is my way of moving things forward. And that is my talent pool, and that is who I choose, because I know that they're gonna kick ass for me. That's the kind of leader I am. I'm gonna cultivate what's in you. I'm gonna like cultivate your garden and then watch you bloom.
It's amazing.
That's what I try to do.
I wish all leaders were like that.
Yes, right? Of course. And not only are you educating others through workshops, building community, but you're also a role model yourself. And an entrepreneur, sorry, the biggest thing. You are an entrepreneur, which is the most stressful, time consuming, hard balancing thing. You are like embodying a lot of versions of yourself.
I don't know. I guess I think of them as voices in my head. Well, that sounds a little cuckoo crazy. Oh, I have
No,
voices in my
we've got voices in our heads, baby. Yeah. I have two prominent ones. The privileged, logical one that's like, you should hustle, you should make more money. Why are you resting? Come on. And then the primitive brain, let's say, that's like, you're burnt out. You should rest, girl.
Yeah.
You've done too much. So I have these fights every day. So you're normal, don't worry. Oh, I said normal again. What can I say? Well, I want to kind of get that mentality out of my head.
I do think this, in this case, when we're reframing something that's considered quote unquote abnormal by society as normal, that's a good. We know. I think it's about reclaiming the idea of normal.
I'm just wondering if it's even there.
No, but I guess it's the way I see it. If everyone's normal, no one is. Like if we just
Yeah.
have the sense of radical acceptance that, hey, whatever you go through is normal and part of the general human experience, then this preconceived notion of normal disappears.
The current definition of normal is just like the average.
Yeah.
Did you search that?
No,
Oh.
I'm just
I
thinking
thought you were
because
on Google.
no, the reason we say things are normal, right, is because that is stereotypically what we see most commonly. So therefore, it is the mean, like the average. What do you encounter most is what we see as normal.
You can't blame how you grew up or how you're a friend, but I also like this idea of it being what we've come across most frequently, because of the systems and how they were built and by whom, because of forces like, and I'm not to dive into this here, but like colonialism, etc.
Oh gosh, that's another
I
episode.
I don't want to use the C word. Because of these forces of consolidation of power, these are the people that set the rules. And then they propagated people like them. So whether we like it or not, up until quite recently, this was what we saw all the time. But through the work we're doing here, and through the changes in just humanity, how humanity has been intermingling for, I believe more than half the world's population will be mixed race by 2040, if I'm not wrong. So whether we like it or not, normal is changing. So it's about get with the program, or eventually, hopefully, as more of us keep intermingling, as more voices like ours come back up, find our power, it's just gonna flip. It's a numbers game at this point.
What do you think then? Because you do the workshop, you see a lot of things happening in offices and people ask you for specific things, probably in corporate, right? What do we need to do, like either as employees, as individuals, or as organizations to truly be diverse, inclusive, accommodate for everyone?
Listen and try.
Sounds simple.
People will tell you what they need. Listen. And that's the hardest part. And hey, I'm not gonna lie to you, I struggle with it too. When my team calls me out on something, my first inner instinct is, ooh, I don't like being called out. And then, your natural instinct is to either, fight or flight. You either retreat, pull away, be like, I don't want to deal with this person anymore, or lash out, fight back. Listen, open your ears. If they're telling you they're struggling with something, there's a reason. And it's not about whether you can. Not right now. Right now, it's about whether you try. Right. Open your ears, take that feedback, see what they need, and then be an advocate for them. And then hope that through modeling that behavior, your colleagues will start doing the same. And then maybe, just maybe, hopefully, you'll inspire your bosses to do the same. And they'll inspire their bosses. But it starts with you. It starts with one voice advocating. And being brave, and I get it. It's super scary to go up to ask for more budget because someone needs an accommodation. Or to develop a program or two. But if you take on that responsibility, it comes back to you tenfold. In love, in loyalty, in even, some of us love bottom line and operational efficiency. And yes, the research is there. Diverse teams have proven to be more innovative and proven to financially outperform. So it's there. You just need to be brave enough to push.
I was going to say, how do you conquer that if you don't feel safe to open up, to tell your boss, for example, or your colleague that you are neurodivergent or you need extra help and stuff? What if you don't feel safe to do that?
Find an ally. Find a friend that at the very least you can't well, no, you can't. You're not doing it alone anymore.
Mm.
If you can't tell your boss yet, find someone you can tell. And I think we undervalue the value of friendship at work.
Mm.
But friends keep you sane.
8 hours a day plus
Yeah.
in that environment.
Just like find that friend you can tap into, just someone to talk to. And then slowly but surely try to open up, try to find community. And then when the time is right, lean on your community and try to communicate. And I can't promise it'll all go your way, but what I can promise is that it's worth it. You shouldn't have to suffer in silence. It's not. Being you is not a death sentence. There are spaces out there that can accept you. There are journeys you can build. And even if there aren't in organizations, your journey might be like mine. It might be that you need to push, you need to create your own.
Mm.
Follow your inner voice. Follow your intuition. I think we've forgotten that exists. You know, we've rationalized the world. We've intellectualized everything. And there is strategies, there is models. Like, models are endless.
Mm.
But sometimes, well, not sometimes, I think all the time, you need to balance that with your gut.
Mm.
Where your source energy comes from. You find your inner voice, and your inner voice tells you, I'm good, I need to stand up for this, then stand up. If your inner voice says we're not ready, then we just find our community, find each other.
I agree. They're always there. And just maybe if someone can relate to this as well. I went the majority of corp not telling people about myself. Because I remember when once I applied for a job and it said like, oh, state if you have dyslexia or whatever. And I put ADHD and then I got rejected automatically. And I don't know whether it was just me protecting myself or it was their test essentially just saying, no, unfortunately, you're automatically rejected. But I just felt like, okay, then I need to just put a mask almost, which is really, really normal. Yeah. And I did that the majority of my career until I told my boss at the time and I said it to her. I said, yeah, I've been diagnosed. So then she replied, oh, this makes sense. Should we tell the rest of the team what's wrong with you? And I was like, what? I didn't laugh. I cried after, of course. But because she was young and so new with dealing with this, right? Dealing with coming across this. And for her, she kind of explained and said, yeah, because you're loud and you're spontaneous sometimes. And like, it makes sense. Like, it'd be good to tell the rest of the team. And I was like, I told you in secret. I don't really want to tell. Like, it's not like a gossip. I'm just telling you because I thought this was safe. And even then, ever since then, it got confirmed to me, like, I can't speak about this. And only recently, I just was like, fuck it, it's part of me. I'm gonna shout it from the rooftops. I'm gonna mention it in workshops, on LinkedIn, like normalize it. But like,
that is in a way normalizing it, because if this is a normal human experience that humans go through, again, that goes back to that idea of if everything is normal, nothing is.
yeah.
So yeah, I'm all for normalization. Normalize disability, normalize neurodivergence, normalize people misspeaking. I mean, hey, I just, when I was talking about Kimberly Crenshaw and I was like, oh, I didn't research it, my first thought was, okay, people are going to think I don't research it at all. I didn't look it up right now. And I could think of like a countless amount of like little things I've said that I'm like, ooh, people will take that wrong.
But like right now?
Yeah, but that's life. I think of that every day. I have a word police and it's always going off.
Where do you think that comes from? From the systemic change, or like where does that authoritative voice come from?
I think it comes from this idea, and this is an idea I'm personally fighting against every day. You should be thankful and careful. The system taught me I need to be both those things all the time. Thankful for being here. Careful what I say. Thankful for being here. Careful what I say. Because who knows who might listen to this? Who knows who might listen to this that might mean me harm? Or even not mean me harm, just disagree with me and want to express their opinion. And then they might have whatever kind of huge following of angry people that want to come at me. Who knows what kind of potential client might think what I said was slightly too controversial. So I'm always in that balance of, what do I want to say? What can I say? How much can I say? And that happens in every conversation I take part in. People are like, why are you so exhausted after a networking event? Because, like you just said, you used the word masking. I'm not masking on purpose. It's not like the version of Karim you meet at an event is not the real me. But there's always a little sprinkle. Something I've chosen to put forward today. I think today I'm really proud of myself because I came to this podcast and I was like, I want to be myself. I want to be open. I want to be expressive. I'm not going to hide.
Thank you. You should. It's celebrated here. It's trying to break barriers, stigmas, rethinking what happiness is, right? Because I also want to be more of an ally, advocate. I want to do, and even the audience as well, right? That's where they're listening or watching. Is there a way, like, that we can become more consciously aware of how we talk, or like simple ways that we can actively help in some way, just in our, like, when we travel to work, when we are at work, when we're socializing on social media? Like, is there things that we can actively do in order to be more inclusive and allies?
Be kind. Kindness first. As long as you're kind and well-meaning, that's a good place to start. And then those of you who have the capacities and the resources, those of you that are team leads, those of you that are directors, those of you that are C-level, invest. Open doors. Drive change. I promise you, you'll get your investment back tenfold. Because people like me work their asses off. A good friend of mine who works in the mental health space gave me this allegory about trauma. We're not responsible for what people, caregivers, taught us or did to us. We were children. We had no say, no agency. Yet, as an adult, it's on us to march our way to therapy and like learn how to deal with people or deal with our struggles. And I think that analogy is the same. It may not be your fault that the system was built this way. But the minute you stepped up to the plate, not even stepped up to the plate, the minute you became an adult, started dealing with other people, started not being told what to do, to me it becomes your responsibility. Ownership, 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 above all else. And please, 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 if you can, fight for people. That fight could be as simple as sitting with someone in a cafeteria or going on a date with someone you don't expect, and as big as pushing budgets, fighting change. Fight for the change. Well, not fighting for the change.
Yeah, no, like physical fights, like.
Oh yeah, no punching, please. Fight with words, not with hands.
Could get to that point. Maybe I'm joking.
Well, it depends. If it gets to the point of self-defense, if you're fighting to survive,
Oh,
please fight to survive. Like, don't die. We don't want you to die.
no. And the wheel of
Power and privilege.
Yes, I discovered this because of your previous episode, not with us, with another podcast, Journeys of Empowerment. Little shout out. And I saw it and it looked really. We'll display it here on the screen. it looked really overwhelming, like with the amount of information that was in it. Could you kindly explain, like, what does
Sure.
it mean? How do you use it?
So actually, that ties into what we've been talking about with this whole myth of normal, this whole episode. The wheel of power privilege is a handy tool for you to situate yourself against what the system considers normal and therefore gives power to. So, you've got that little power circle in the center,
Mm-hmm.
and then you've got the typical categories we associate with power, being male, being white. The closest circle is what your society considers normal.
Okay.
The second circle is a bit further from that. And then the third circle is even further. So, like I said, keeping the example of language, at the closest to the circle, would have a born and Dutch native speaker. For Dutch communities, usually we talk about English as the native language, because that's like if we generalize to the Western world, English is a very important language to have. Then there's that language was learned, as in you acquired it. That's sort of the second tier. And then the third tier would be no reference to that language at all. The further you are from the center, the more you are marginalized, the more you do not gain from the advantages of society, if that makes sense.
Oh.
And this tool is designed to show you where you fit as an individual. And that's why there's so much in it, because it's meant to show you your intersectionality.
Ah, okay, right.
So basically, the whole point of that kind of tool is that you go through the circle, right? And you're like, well, I learned English, but I'm really neurodivergent. But I also happen to be a man. And you see how these different categories sort of interplay to shape your experience.
Yeah. And then what do you do with the realization, with the wheel?
I think it's a strong conversation starter.
Okay.
Use it wherever you need to use it. I think it's it's a very sort of entryway tool for you to start dealing with this topic.
And you use this in your workshops, right? And
yes, it is. It is often the first exercise or tool I like to introduce in a training, in a workshop. To me, it's sort of to establish the baseline of, okay, we live in a world of systems. This is what society views as normal. Now, how do people in this room relate to that?
Right. And what's the outcome? Is it similar most of the times, or it's always different?
Depends on the room I'm in. I tend to be in rooms filled, luckily, with different kinds of people. So you get all kinds of outcomes, and then they start learning, oh, we're all different. We all need to learn to work better together. But sometimes it's in a room where I find them all looking at each other and then looking at, oh, how do you feel it? How do you feel it out? And then suddenly they realize, oh, no, we're all the same.
Oh.
And they start getting this idea of like how you're in an echo chamber of the same kinds of people. And that's often where I can start coming in and be like, don't you think that limits innovation, for example? Don't you think that limits growth if you're all the same? When people can visually see it because they've colored it in, it's like oh, now I see it. A lot of people are like visual learners and they like to experience things. People are very tactile. So I often have this little printout and I hand it out and like people colored it in and they're like, ooh, now I get it.
And awareness is the first step.
Yes. Awareness. Awareness.
I want to play a game.
Oh yeah, we love games.
The last question will be picked by you. It's Spark, which is seek discomfort. Yes. And we do this I don't know if I'm in the mic still. We do this at the end of the episodes because we like to spice things up and let the universe and you pick.
Does this episode need to be even spicier?
Oh my God.
Haven't we spiced up enough?
I'm nervous. I'm joking.
Grandma's like clutching her pearls at home. Like, my goodness.
Here you go.
Let me see.
Wherever your heart goes. And then you can read it, ask yourself, and then answer it.
Who or what do you want to let go of moving forward? I'm putting this out as a call into the universe. or God or whatever it is you believe in. I'm Muslim, so I do believe in God. So I guess I'm putting it out the God / the universe. May God attract to me the people that celebrate me and open doors for me and make my heart shine, and push away those that mean me harm. Those that put on fake smiles, pretend to be my friends. Those that play the game against me in secret. I know that I'm not, like, this sucks to say, but I'm not dumb. I know that a lot of people might find me uncomfortable, might find my difference uncomfortable. So much so that they would push against it. All I ask is that the universe and God protect me from those that mean me harm and bring in those that celebrate my light. And I don't wish that only for me. I wish that for you, Daisy. I wish that for you, Jimmy. I wish that for everyone listening out there. That God protects us from those that mean us harm and bring in our path the people who brighten our light.
That was so beautiful. That was amazing. You've put it out in the universe. You will receive it.
Yeah. We all need a bit more light, I think.
There's a lot of light here. I'm kidding.
It's a good one.
No, and especially in the Netherlands.
Oh, yeah. That's a good tip, actually. Vitamin D deficiency. Be careful of that.
Oh.
Take your vitamin D pills. Well, no, at the very... Find some sun, yes, but also at the very least take it in pill form. Yeah. I think someone told me that the first year I moved here, and I was like, what are you talking about?
Oh.
And then I was super depressed, and then I suddenly took vitamin D pills, and I was like, I feel better. And I was like...
You're joking?
No, I'm not. Like, that's the thing, like... I remember it was a professor, I think she was from Indonesia, my first year of uni when I moved to Netherlands. She was literally like, she literally took aside all the students of color, the people that have melanated skin, and was like, you already come from sunny countries. You already have, like, your skin already is a bit tougher than other people. You're going to get vitamin D deficiency and it's going to make you very depressed. And at the time I was like, girl, what are you talking about? Like,
oh my god.
But it does actually help. Vitamin D pills. Vitamin D pills all the way.
Wow. You heard it here. Karim's episode. An extra nugget of wisdom.
Let me be clear. This is not medical advice. This is just what works for me.
I'm going to try it.
Please.
Probably in your AG1 and everything else you
I take a lot of vitamins and stuff. You know, like the green drinks.
Oh, you're a green girl.
Don't categorize me.
Oopsie.
I'm kidding. But Karim, this was amazing. I don't know how much time has gone past, but
I have no idea.
Where can people find you if they want to book you for a workshop or a keynote?
Find me on LinkedIn. You can also find out more about my company at www.thewheelsofimpact.com. And yeah, I also have an Instagram for those of you that want to reach out to me for more private matters.
How private?
I don't know, girl. I don't know. Open inbox.
You put it out in the universe.
Encouragement to slide into my DMs. Who knows? No, but like it's funny because I know some people just don't like LinkedIn. I mean, I'm a LinkedIn addict, so I'm the wrong person to talk about this. But like, I feel like when you're sending a DM, it feels so official.
Yes.
Well, if you're sending like, if you're sending an Instagram DM, it's like, oh, hey, cool. Like, even if I have friends who I operate with professionally and we talk about like workshops and stuff, we still have that little channel where we send memes to each other on Instagram. So that's, being mindful of lowering the barrier. If Instagram's easier for you, find me using my name. It's spelled exactly the same way. Otherwise, find me on LinkedIn.
Thank you for sharing your wisdom, what you do, helping us see more of understanding your world, but also other people's worlds, understanding what normal is, and ditching that phrase as well. And yeah, this was really insightful. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.